You see, all these people really are differentiated between two schools of thought. The prickly people and the gooey people. And on the side of goo, we have the romanticists, and on the side of prickles, the classicists. In medieval times, on the side of goo, we had people who were then called realists, and on the side of prickles, the people who were called nominalists. Now, realists believed that every man, individual person, was an example of an essence called mankind. The realists said that's a lot of nonsense. There are only particular people. There is no such essence called mankind. And today, the logical positivists and behaviorists are examples of prickly people, and mystics and idealists in the Berkeleyan sense are examples of gooey people. And this is an eternal debate. When you examine any substance closely, you find structure. But when your lens gets out of focus, you find substance or goo, because you can't see the details. So it is all homogeneous, like homogenized milk. So depending on the level of magnification with which you look at life, you see prickles or structure, and goo or stuff. And all philosophical debates go along between these people. Whereas the truth of the matter is, of course, that life is gooey prickles and prickly goo. Now, don't get taken in by being too prickly. This is the thing that in our academic world today, in considering what its fashions are, is the besetting temptation. That to secure oneself as an honest and respectable academician who is of sound scientific approach. People who ought not to be so prickly, because they're dealing with things in which there are infinitely many variables, put on the idea that they know what all the prickles in this psychological situation are, and we just don't. You have to get a bit gooey. And don't be ashamed of it. So then, we have to consider mythology. We've looked at myths now, two myths, which have been so influential on our culture. And one myth was an authoritarian, paternalistic one, that we are under God. We are the subjects of the divine king who acts towards us in the role of a cosmic grandfather. This was all rather uncomfortable. And so, as I pointed out, there's a reactionary myth that the universe isn't interested in us at all. It was too interested in us, you see, with the God the Father myth. So the reaction to that is that it's not a bit interested. Nature cares nothing for the individual, only for the species. You know that story. I invite you to consider another myth, and I say myth, which is, of course, the famous Hindu myth that the universe is a drama. See, a drama is it is an image, just like an artifact, considering the universe as something constructed, put together, manufactured. That's a myth. But the dramatic myth is different from the constructionist myth. In the dramatic myth, there is a very immediate relationship between any member of the world, that is to say, a human being, and the root and ground, what there is. Because in the dramatic myth, every one of you is basically connected with the reality which for untold billions of years has sparkled in these galaxies and nebulae. These are not things foreign to you. What you see outside you, or apparently outside you, although it looks distant and foreign, is most fundamental to you. There was sense in what is now only a superstition, astrology. Astrology as a means of predicting what is going to happen to any individual in his life is, as far as I could make out, of almost null value. But there was one sensible idea behind it. When you cast a person's horoscope, what you did was you drew a map of the then known universe as it was at the time this child was born. And this was supposed to be a map of his soul. What an ingenious idea. It is to say, your soul is the whole world as it focuses upon your moment. Now, ordinarily, when we talk of souls, we think of something clad in a sheet with holes in it, like a Halloween ghost, that is a kind of miasmic creature that inhabits your body, and when you die, it leaves you like the breath leaves you. But that's not the soul at all. The soul is something which contains the body. The body doesn't contain the soul. The soul, if we put it into modern language, is the entire complex of relationships in whose context this organism exists. So it includes social relationships, communications relationships, dynamic relationships of heat and temperature, relationships with animals, with insects, with bacilli, relationships with gravity, with cosmic rays, and interstellar balances. All these things, as they are focused at any individual point in the world, constitute the soul. And that was the truth in the astrological diagram. But we are, as I said, taught to feel this system inside out, to ignore the soul and identify with the body, with the organism. It's not that the body and soul are different in the Cartesian sense. It's not that they're different substances. They're all the same world. The soul is the physical world in its entirety. And God only knows what that contains, because our senses are attuned only to a very small spectrum band of the physical world. But there it is. And if you persist in screening out the knowledge of yourself as all that has been defined in our system of conventions as other than you, you're going to be very unhappy, because you're going to feel estranged. And this estrangement that most of us feel in our culture is reflected in things that we do that are very destructive. We constantly hear of man's conquest of nature. And we talk about the conquest of space. And we talk about when we climb great mountains, we speak as if we were conquering them. Why this hostility? Look at this rocket. These enormous, aggressive phallic emblems being zoomed at the moon. What do you think that means? They're going to screw the moon. Poor old Venus. No? Well, now, this is a ridiculous way to explore space. You're never going to get anywhere in a rocket. It's a crawling thing. It's a horse and buggy. If you want to explore space, the right direction to go is radio astronomy. Because that makes the outer space come to you. You don't have to go to it. You're in space. Here we are, floating on this Earth, which is way out in space. We're already there. All we need to do to find out what's around us is get more sensitive, more open, develop things that are like the radio astronomical things. Maybe we can find instruments more sensitive yet than those. And they will bring the outside to us instead of going, boom, and conquering it.